The Objective 3D lesson is going to examine the post-war era and how after World War II, the Cold War is almost immediately triggered. If you remember from the World War II lesson, there were hints of global nuclear war long before the war ended. Things like the Tehran Conference, where it was clear that Stalin and the Western leaders did not trust each other, would go a long way to impacting the onset of the Cold War. In addition, Soviet troops were chosen to liberate Eastern Europe, this area, from Hitler. As the Soviet troops moved into areas like Poland and Czechoslovakia, obviously that is going to give Soviet troops an advantage over other Allied troops. The Soviets believed they had a legitimate claim to them because of that. And so you can see here the Iron Curtain, as Churchill says at a graduation in America, that an iron curtain is descending across the continent, and he feels the need to bring this up in America because we do love our ocean privilege. Remember, it took us 4 years to get involved in World War II, several years to get involved in World War I. We enjoyed our Atlantic buffer. Truman almost immediately issues the doctrine of containment, which means that we want to keep communism where it is, prevent it from spreading. Critics claimed that in order to do this, you were going to have the United States involved in conflicts around the world. In modern times, this is likened to some of our early 2000 policies on terrorism, hoping to eradicate it and spread democracy around the world. It does lead to military presence throughout the world. Both containment and paranoia were very evident in the Soviet life and in American life. On both sides of the Iron Curtain, the Cold War intensified every day. Anxiety, bringing air raid drills, spy trials, warning that the way of life was at stake, and appeals to defend family and home against the menacing other. The heart of the Cold War is paranoia, but it's also Germany. Germany is divided because after World War I, if you remember, Germany descended into Nazism. So we divide Germany among the four winning powers, and then Berlin itself, which is in the heart of the Soviet territory, is divided. It doesn't take long for the West Berlin and West Germany to unite as one anti-communist country. And then, of course, East Berlin and East Germany are united as a communist country. Early on, Truman gets a victory for containment when the Soviets block all access to Berlin. The Americans and Allied forces then issue the Berlin Airlift, which is going to airlift supplies into West Berlin. And it worked. And after 324 days, the Soviets lift the blockade. And so Truman believes this is the path forward to prevent the spread of communism, but also to prevent there from being war. After the war, another way that Americans and world leaders were trying to prevent radicalism from coming back to Europe was they wanted to give economic relief. The horrible economic time of the Great Depression is one of the things that made Hitler and other radical leaders so popular. So Allied nations established the Marshall Plan and Soviet nations Comecon. You can see here from the diagram that the areas where Marshall Plan money is going are areas that are allied against communism. The yellow countries are NATO and the Warsaw Pact. So from an economic perspective, you have Marshall Plan and Comecon. From a military perspective, you have NATO and the Warsaw Pact. NATO is a military alliance of these yellow countries, and the same for the communist countries, indicating an attack on one would be an attack on all. The idea here was hopefully that if everyone knew that any more further aggression was going to unite the world into conflict again, it would prevent the conflict from coming. And next, the race for the bomb. The Soviet Union, after our first atomic bomb blast in Japan, eagerly is hoping to get an atomic bomb. They developed one as well. And by 1953, both superpowers had tested a super bomb 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Iwo Jima. So it's very important to understand that these two paranoid groups of people are anxiously pursuing the most deadly weapon, which only leads to further paranoia and fear that a nuclear Armageddon is at hand. Immediately after World War II, you have the onset of the Cold War, and it will plague the United States and the Soviet Union for decades to come.